Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Silvana Mastella. I'm the CEO of TrustIT and the coordinating partner of StandICT.eu 2023, supported also by Dublin City University with Ray Walsh, who's our External Advisory Group Chair and our YOS Director, and Australo, who supports us in our synergies engagement and our fellows. So with us today, this is our, I think it might be our third walk and talk webinar entitled Trusted Information in the Digital Age. We're here for 1 hour. I'm joined by a super panel of experts with me. So we're going to start off with a brief overview of the EU contributions to ICT standardization, where I'd like to give you a zooming in on the first quarter and first part of Q2 achievements of what we've done within StandICT. Then I'm going to pass the floor to Sebastian Hallensleber, who's the head of digitalization and AI at VDE. And he's also our YOS Technical Working Group Chair. When you see TWG, that's what it stands for, on trusted information. And he's going to give us an overview of defending trust and identity in the digital age and what we're aiming to achieve in our technical working group. Then we'll pass the floor to Caroline Thomas. She's a convener for ISO TC 307, and she is an EPE member. An EPE member is an external pool of evaluator for StandICT. So thank you and welcome Caroline and Sebastian, who has clearly the inside information on what it takes to write a perfect call application for ICT standardization efforts and within the remit of StandICT. And then finally, we'll finish up with Galia Kondova, who's a senior lecturer and researcher, and she is a fellow of StandICT.eu 2023. A fellow, we've coined this term for all of those successful applicants who have had a yes in their application and are receiving funding. So she's going to give us an overview of what that means, and also the title of her presentation is Trusted Information on Blockchain, the Case for Public-Private Partnerships. Sorry, I've forgotten to say Caroline's, which are key things to create a compelling criteria-led application. So with that, we'll get going. We will be recording the webinar. What we do advise you to do is to write any questions in our chat that we'll take after each of the presenters. And welcome once again, and we look forward to having you with us in this next hour. So, key achievements of StandICT. So we finished our second open call. There are 10 in total, and we're currently running on the third open call, which closes on the 18th of May. We've issued a functional grants platform, and never an easy thing to do, to evaluate applications. And as we know, getting these out in a timely manner to help satisfy the timing of 10 open calls within 36 months. This is the duration of the StandICT project. We really need a plug and play continuous activity that goes on, and we're thrilled that we've managed to do this, thanks also to our experts and those who apply as well. What we've also done that I want to highlight in these months is kicked out a European Observatory for ICT Standardization. You see the branding here. We call it YOS, pronounced Y-O-S, which has a twofold objectives. One is to create this active list of standard ICT repository linked very closely with standardization organizations. So we make sure that whatever is in there is the most timely and relevant updated standardization efforts taking place. And then at the same time, we've introduced a discussion forum where people can come and interact and mainly work on efforts around these technical working groups on different topics, which I'll discuss later on, to pull out landscape reports and gap analysis reports as well. We're extremely pleased that we've been signing regularly memorandum of understanding with significant players, which I'll show you in a moment who these are, to help grow a go-to standard community that people feel that if they need to do anything around ICT standards, they can go here and find whatever they need. Some facts and figures around the first open call, we received 98 applications, and through the rigorous external evaluations, 36 were funded for an amount of €307,000. You can see here the most targeted topics. When you go online, under each of the open calls, there are the list of the priority topics. What we try and do is engage with the relevant stakeholders and see after each call whether there are any topics that are currently being discussed within working groups or technical committees that are missing from the priority list that we have, and we make sure that we introduce this for the next open call that's then issued. So this is an important activity. It's not a static list, although we do cross-check with whatever is written in the ICT rolling plan of standardization, but it is a fluid list that we can obviously tap into and modify. In fact, as a result of the second open call, we had comments from our stakeholders wanting to work around efforts on edge computing and ontologies and open data standards. And in fact, these did come in to the call from potential applicants. So these were the results of the second call. I don't have, unfortunately, the amount that have been funded. This is going through as I speak, but 68 proposals were received, and this is the amount of funding. And these were the relevant SDOs that the applications went into. I must say that the level and quality of these applications are extremely high. Some facts and figures, just some keywords we wanted to put into some tag clouds of some of the topics, specifically around these 5 areas around blockchain, cybersecurity, big data, 5G, and artificial intelligence. What's important when you see these numbers is that one of our jobs is to make sure that we're able to identify the impact that these fellows bring to the table. And we actually monitor this, and we produce impact reports as a result of what's going on. So this is an important exercise. So we never leave the fellow. Once they've had a successful application, we carry it right through till the end and ensure then that the results are tracked and distributed. We send this out to the right channels. So the YOS, as I mentioned before, this is when you go onto the page in the website of StandICT, you will see this homepage here that's divided into 2. One is on the standardization discussion on the left, and the second, you explore the ICT standards repository. Here, the repository is divided in keywords. At the moment, there are over 1,280 standards. And what we do is to cross-check the fellows that apply for funding, and whatever work they're doing with a specific SDO, we ensure it's cross-checked that we have it listed within our repository. I mentioned the YOS as well, a discussion forum. What we've done at the moment is set up 6 technical working groups. And in fact, today we have the chair of the technical working group on trusted information, Sebastian, you can see this here. And the others are on blockchain, AI, big data spaces and data interoperability, cybersecurity, and smart cities. We have a chair, we have a group of select and potentially co-chair at times too, that deliver a landscape analysis in short 6-week sprints, but not on their own. We make sure that clearly it's a community global effort, and these documents then are sent to different DGs of the European Commission and to the various standardization bodies as well. We also introduced, to help support the collaborative space area better, you don't just discuss and comment, but these reports are placed within the Nextcloud that you can edit directly. In addition to these technical working groups, we've also set up an academy chaired by Brian McAuliffe, who's also an external advisory group member. And the key objective is to set up an area on StandICT and the YOS that helps those people who don't know anything about standardization. We know there's an array of teaching material out there, so we want to put everything together. We know that ETSI and ISO have delivered a lot of material in the past and ongoing on teaching materials, and we want to create a type of education modules, if you like, for students. Here's a list of the people who are currently involved, but we want to try and put across the message the importance of standardization for both business and to support Europe's competitiveness. And this is nicely linked because actually today from European Commission Digit, I received a survey request to fill in to actually assess the benefit of standardization on research and innovation projects under Horizon 2020. So this is an assessment that's being carried out now, which is timely, clearly, and I look forward to completing that. These are the synergies that we have at the moment with either a memorandum of understanding or the other synergies of these are representatives who are in our expert advisory group or are part of our technical working group. And so also introducing quite a few Horizon 2020 projects of people who work on ICT standards, and we, StandICT, can help boost that content and make sure it goes into the right channels. Don't forget, the third open call closes on the 18th of May. So if you have your application, please try and get that in as soon as possible. And we hope you are successfully evaluated. To conclude, here are some of our successful applicants and with the specific SDOs they are currently contributing to, and a snapshot also of our esteemed external advisory group that we're thrilled to have, who are the connections to the standards bodies, and we make sure that everything we are doing makes sense, is relevant, and is impactful. And with that, I will close. If you're not following us, then please do contact us for any information you would like to know more about StandICT. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor to Sebastian, who will give a talk on defending trust and identity in the digital age. Thank you very much, everybody, and over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Silvana. I will share my screen and launch into the slides, hopefully straight away. Welcome, and thank you very much, first of all, to Silvana for the introduction and the overview and setting the frame and also organizing this whole project. And also thank you to Ray Walsh, who's also in the webinar today, and as the chair of the expert advisory group of StandICT, took great care not just to look at what's going on and sort of have an opinion on it, but actually being very proactive in identifying the next big challenges that we are going to face. And the title of this presentation, Defending Trust and Identity in the Digital Age, sounds a little bit dramatic. And that's because the challenge we are facing is, in my opinion, and also in the opinion of quite a few colleagues, quite dramatic. And that's why we formed one of the technical working groups on this topic. And I'd like to provide a quick overview what we're talking about and why this is leading to new standardization needs that we haven't really got on the radar so far. I'd like to start with this picture here. 6 friendly people, different types of people, different backgrounds, but none of these people exist. All of these people were generated by artificial intelligence. Many of you will know this demonstration, This Person Does Not Exist.com. It's still live and demonstrates very, very nicely how good AI is in generating content and also generating faces of people that don't actually exist and are indistinguishable from the real thing. Of course, we have deep fakes to fake videos or to fabricate videos. That's been in the press for a long time, for the past 2.5 to 3 years. There are various use cases and modes here. In this case, it's possible to imprint one's own facial expression onto the face of another person. And of course, we also have the opportunity to generate text. Many of you will have heard about GPT-3, the AI model that is able to generate text in real time. And the use cases range from the really harmless, as it's being shown here. You have a list of bullet points on the left, and GPT-3 will turn this into a very well-formed email message. But you can imagine that this would also work, for example, for bullet points describing the positive characteristics of a product, which are then turned into various product reviews automatically. Or it could be bullet points representing some political opinion, which GPT-3 could then turn into forum posts or discussion contributions on some platform. GPT-3, in contrast to its predecessor, is also able to create various speaking styles. So you have a little list here in the middle, whether you want extroverted or a clickbait style or an open style. It can even convert a sentence from one style to another style. And going one step further still, GPT-3 can generate text, but it can also generate code, because code ultimately is also text. And so from a very innocuous prompt, such as a website like StandICT.eu that is about a chat app, GPT-3 can automatically generate a whole functional website with the desired properties that is very, very credible. And in the boxes at the bottom, I've got 2 other examples. You might give GPT-3 a prompt. Well, I'd quite like to have a diploma from Harvard University in my name and with a top grade. Or I'd quite like a clone of the website of a rating agency that is not an exact clone, but that is modified to advise investing in a specific company. Of course, with a view to influencing stock prices. So that's also something that GPT-3 is able to do. And as a final example of what is possible, our One.ai is a fairly recent startup in the US, where you upload 7 minutes of yourself as a video. And those 7 minutes are enough for our One to generate an AI clone, which can then present online learning content, which can answer customer support questions, which can take prospective clients on a tour through some real estate that's for sale. All that can even conduct simple job interviews. So this is a technical capability that is already there, that is already being sold. 7 minutes of video is enough to create a full and very, very convincing AI clone. So on the face of it, this is a fascinating technical development. It's possible to fabricate content in any format. It's possible to do it live. But of course, it's obvious that this opens the door to very substantial forgery and fraud issues. So if I take all those tools together, I can actually now create convincing bots that go online. I can create maybe 100 or 1,000 bots that go online and might take part in discussions, promoting my own views, but pretending to be 100 or 1,000 different people promoting those same views. I can send those bots online to write their own blogs and publish their own blogs with news items. I can even use AI-based forgery tools of this kind to create whole news media or to create specialist journals. I don't really make it easy to distinguish that they are in fact fabricated. The same goes for product review sites. I can even give each of my 100 or 1,000 bots their own YouTube channel. I can make them into influencers. I can let them interact with followers and build followers. And of course, if I want to be a bit more sinister still, I can combine these capabilities with micro-targeting. So what is actually technically possible is a comprehensive and targeted manipulation of the digital sphere, where real people online and the content generated by those real people online becomes a needle in a haystack of bots or kind of pretend people and fabricated content that has been created by AI tools. So we have a fairly serious problem because it has some fairly fundamental consequences. First of all, for citizens, it becomes very difficult to distinguish truth from lies, and this leads to an erosion of trust in information and ultimately other citizens. It also becomes quite difficult to have any kind of political discourse, because suppose I'm discussing with someone online and try to convince them of my own opinion. Well, if I don't really know whether I'm discussing with a bot or not, I'll never be able to convince a bot of my own views. So I'm wasting my time, and I lose trust in the possibility of political discourse. And also, I'm no longer being heard because my voice is being drowned out by the voices of thousands of bots that don't even need to be particularly good or convincing, but they're good enough to distract attention from the contributions that I actually might want to make as a person. And for business, I mentioned product reviews already, and it's a well-known issue that many of those reviews are faked. If I can automate those fakes, then I can scale up, and it becomes very, very difficult for business to sell on quality and reputation rather than to sell on who's actually publishing or launching the large number of bots. And of course, if we change perspectives to platforms, to social media, to other platforms, there are moderation costs incurred. The more fake content, the more bots, and the more convincing bots there are, and also liability issues. So how do we address this? And I'd like to start there with something that sort of, but not really works. So a common line of argument is, okay, so if there are fabrication tools for content and if there are tools to create bots, well, let's just build detection tools for those fakes and those bots. That's possible, of course. It's also necessary, but it's not a full solution, because as soon as I've got a detection tool, I can use that detection tool to train my fabrication tool to be even better, which then leads to an improvement in the detection tool, which in turn leads to an improvement in the fabrication tools. So I'm entering an arms race here that is necessary, but that on its own is not enough to fundamentally solve this issue. So the working hypothesis in the technical working group is that if we can't rely or can't properly assess the trustworthiness of information, we have to assess the trustworthiness of its source. And if I want to assess the trustworthiness of a source of information, then I need to be able to identify this source somehow. I need to be able to give it a name. But I want to do that without necessarily revealing the real identity of a person. So I don't really want to pay the price of giving up anonymity just to prove in the digital space that I'm a real human being. And I don't really want to go into the details of how this could work. There are pseudonym concepts out there. There are also standards, both related to ID cards and also related to the concept of self-sovereign identity, which is high on the agenda of the European Union right now. But there are possibilities to create such pseudonyms that on one hand prove that you're a human being that can't be multiplied 100 or 1,000 times to be launched by bots, but that protect real identity and privacy. And of course, we will also need tools and protocols and infrastructure to visualize trust, to assist the individual in assessing how much they want to trust which source of information online. And all this, every step of this way, the backtracing, the particular kind of pseudonyms that we need, and also the way of visualizing trust and helping to assess trust is in need of standards. Each of these steps requires standards, and what we're doing in the technical working group is to try and outline and identify which standards we need to support this effort. That's all from me. Thank you very much for the attention, and looking forward to the questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Didn't remind everyone at the beginning, but yes, this is something that doesn't make me sleep at night with my children, as being at an adolescent age. So this is incredibly important for us. I don't know whether I see any hands up at the moment. If anyone in the audience would like to ask an immediate question. If not, then I will have one, and then maybe someone would like to butt in after. What kind of approaches, Sebastian, are taking place at the moment to help identify and combat fake news at the moment?
Well, there are numerous approaches to combat fake news and disinformation. There's been a high-level expert group already 2016-17 on handling disinformation, and there are also numerous activities at national levels. However, what hasn't really been addressed is the additional threat dimension, if you like, that this disinformation can be automated and that it can be auto-generated by AI. And so that's something that hasn't really been addressed yet. And we do have quite some urgency because the technical capabilities are there now, have been for the past 2 years. We have to assume that also the criminal energy and also the kind of sinister commercial motivation is there to use those tools. And we urgently need to prepare for that.
Thank you for that. And the link between trust and privacy, how do we, well, it's a sort of a fine line, isn't it, between the two? How do we make, and especially within the technical working group, how are you going to tackle the two areas?
This is actually a very, very important issue. Because you could argue, well, you can easily solve the issue of bots and fakes online by everyone giving up their privacy and revealing their real identity online. It's a political discussion that pops up occasionally whenever there's some new form of crime online or some hate speech. People will say, hey, we can solve this problem by everyone just revealing their real identity, and we enforce only with your ID card are you allowed to go online and post in forums or be active in social networks or whatever. But there are many, many good reasons that this is not a solution, and that this loss of privacy is not acceptable. Starting with the general view we have in Europe that it shouldn't be necessary to justify privacy. It's actually necessary to justify the loss of privacy, so kind of turning around the burden of proof there. But also very concrete use cases, for example, whistleblowing situations, or situations where people simply want to keep their professional and their private lives separate, or commercially sensitive discussions, and so on. So there are many use cases where you do need to be sure you're talking to a real human being, but you do not want to remove that person's privacy.
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, I wish you the very best of luck. I don't know if you need to do a call out. If anyone on the call is interested in supporting Sebastian on this extremely crucial topic, then please do get in touch with Sebastian directly, or us, or Ray Walsh, who looks after the people who are coming on to the technical working groups. Okay, and let me see. Gerard's also asking, Gerard Hartstick makes a point, the GDPR rules are applicable for natural persons. For legal entities, this requirement is not so relevant. I don't know, Sebastian, if you want to comment on that, or...
Yes, I mean, we actually have two different flavors of the threat here, and I kind of touched on both a little bit. Would you have the threat that AI tools pretend to be human beings and individuals, natural persons, but we've also got the threat that AI tools can pretend to be institutions, or I gave the example of a technical journal that could be AI generated and just subtly promote, for example, a certain product or certain views, while all the rest is just smartly scraped from other sources on the internet and just looks very, very credible. So I think we'll have to consider both of those aspects. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. And then a commended comment from Karen, very inspirational to the ongoing work in ISO JTC1 WD13 trustworthiness. Thank you, Sebastian. With that, so thank you, Sebastian, once again.
Thank you. And if you want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm very, very lucky in that my name only exists once on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thanks again. Yes, please do take Sebastian up on this offer. I did actually think, when I did show the technical working groups, I did not add any of you on the call, and those who listen to the recording after who are interested in any of the technical working groups. Please do contact us. It's a win-win for everybody. Do believe us on this. And I also would like to thank my project officer from the European Commission, Thomas River, and also Emilio Davila Gonzalez, who's extremely supportive on our efforts with StandICT, and where he can. It's incredibly positive to have a very hands-on project officer at the EC. So I'd like to thank Thomas publicly for his support. Moving on, then, I'd like to pass the floor to Caroline Thomas, who is our external pool of evaluator member from Innovate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hi, Caroline. Thank you for joining us. And her title of her presentation is Key Themes to Create a Compelling Criteria-Led Application. And the floor is all yours, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvana, for the introduction and for inviting me. Basically, you asked me, as in my role as an evaluator, to help share some of the approaches that we're seeing to applying for these open calls, and really just share some themes and some tips on really how to nail a compelling application. But certainly thank you to StandICT in setting up these open calls in the first place. We had a conversation earlier about where Sebastian's really presenting a wake-up call for digital identity here and digital trust. Standards are so important to be timely and in the market to be able to create a safe, trusted framework for AI and other technologies. And similarly, I think when we're looking at this StandICT process, what we're seeing is a process, first of all, that has got a clear application form to fill in. It's not too long. Secondly, it's a fast timeline. So if you are applying, you're not waiting for 6 or 10 months to actually proceed with it. And then thirdly, I think when we are talking about timeliness of standards, you have an opportunity to get involved with it, with the work of getting this all these standards out as quickly as possible. So I'll give you an overview really in a role of as an evaluator, what the mindset and the key criteria that we're looking at. You should all be aware. I'm just going to share the screen now. Let's have a look. Yeah. That way you can see that. The title is Creating a Compelling Criteria-Led Application for these open calls. As Silvana has mentioned, the deadline is the 18th, which is really coming up. So hopefully this is timely to help you finesse your application. And if you haven't started it, to get on with it, to get it in for this weekend. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm an evaluator with StandICT, but really my career is in risk management of investments in new technologies and innovation. I've worked with global banks, companies, and NGOs, assessing different forms of investment and funding. And particularly when we're looking at these open calls, these are looking at funding opportunities. It's not a job application, it's a funding application. And there's a different mindset really that you have to apply to risk, to make good decisions in this piece. And then my expertise, 20 odd years in product development in new technologies, but it's the technical expertise in bringing those technologies to market. I'm a specialist in blockchain and DLTs, but particularly within the ISO work that Silvana talked about. I'm creating use cases and convening use cases across fintech, health, supply chains, smart energy, and then onto those global themes of sustainability and climate change, safety and trust as well. So really, I think from a commercial and business sense, I've been involved in funding of innovation and different new technologies. But I particularly got involved in standards, because without standards, it's very hard for new technologies to find adoption, to find scale. And the work that I have within ISO and the EU and BSI and others is all about helping create the standards that allow interoperability, trust, a common language that people are looking at as well. So it's all about bringing standards to life to help new markets develop faster. And then particularly when you're building new technologies, you can all work together to get them, again, to work together. So let's go into this. And a bit of background as well. When you are making funding opportunities, looking at StandICT, you've got a very healthy success rate there. Very often when you're looking at impact, the ROI is about 16% or so. But the work that I was doing at Barclays Techstars with their accelerator program, they're continually running accelerators of 10 or 12 different companies and turning them around between 3 to 6 months. And companies who are investing and working with these different technologies are getting a 70% ROI. So it's a really winning formula and methodology that we're taking there. So let's take that experience and look at the open call applications and truly what are the top 3 approaches that we can start taking on there. I won't go through this slide too much because I think Silvana's already talked about it, but the goals of the open calls are really to start boosting EU experts' contributions so that we can make an impact in international and global standards. When we see that there is major trading blocks and other large nations that are making a loud impact in standards, for me, I think the open calls are really guided to saying, if you're an EU expert or an expert in an EU market, this funding is really there to help you get that job done effectively and allocate your time to help towards a high goal. So it's critically important, I would say, on a global stage there. So let's go into the approach. I've got three sort of approaches and then three remembers and watch outs. The first one might sound really obvious, but when we are looking at applications, there's 4 questions to be answered. They're there for a reason. And often what we see is people almost doing a brain dump of everything you need to know in the first paragraph. Really sit down and go, what do we want to do in 3 to 5 bullet points? What are those 3 impact statements that you might want to put through? If the first question is describe the objectives and concept behind the proposed activity, a really simple way or technique to answer that question is to reverse the question into your answer. So if it's describe the objectives and concept, you open your presentation with, or your application with, the objectives and concept behind my proposed activity is. And all of a sudden we're able as evaluators to understand the crux of what you're trying to get across, rather than trying to find it in paragraph 20 of your application. And then concentrating on those 3 to 5 bullet points per question. Is there a demand for what you're doing? What is it? Be specific. If you're an expert in something, completely call it out. It's not a time to be modest. And then as we go through the other questions, really think from a delivery point of view. If you're working on a working group that's trying to get a standard out by March of next year, let us know what that is and what impact it's making. If I go on to the next page, the third line here is demonstrate the planned activity. So in my work, I work across lots of different countries, lots of different cultures. Some are much more modest than others. A theme is, if you're applying from Australia, you always talk about the teamwork. A theme about applying in America is often that many people are very leadership focused and goal focused. So it's all I led this. And then in Europe and other places, it's all different approaches. But this is the time in an application to call out that I led this, I wrote the chapter on, I'm an expert in, I will deliver X by Y. So do not be modest in this application. They're short for a reason. So really call yourself out on that one. So those are 3 sort of headline approaches that make you help a concise application, that makes it easier as evaluators for us to zero down on the crux of the impacts that you're bringing. And then it's the watch outs and the remembers too. We're often so focused on getting our applications out the door that we forget to do certain things. I've mentioned about focusing on your expertise. List the roles in all the different organizations that you're in. Don't be shy, but still be well aware of avoiding the marketing hype. Some applications might look like, particularly if you're looking at technology-based applications, sometimes they might read as if you're promoting the blockchain or whichever technology you're facing. So it's so easy to say this technology will change the world and make life-changing differences. You don't need to say that. Tell us why. And I think in our next presentation, we'll see why blockchain brings a certain range of attributes that makes an impact. So just go back to those attributes and keep it simple. And if you are using jargon, again, when we're all involved in standards, we're used to people understanding the jargon and all the different liaisons between the committees. As an evaluator, we're experts in certain areas, so be very, very specific, explaining your jargon, explaining the context of where you're working in that piece. Meet the budget. It sounds obvious, but again, we know what the day rate is. It's €450. work out your budget and say, I'm going to be working for X amount of days, delivering the activity of a report or being an expert in whatever you're in. The KPIs are to get a report out by next year, to get a chapter or research written within 2 months, or even just to kick off a new project or a new standard. So if you can, we ask it in the questions, but be specific. I want X amount of days at X amount of cost, and in that time I will be delivering X, Y, and Z. We don't need to know the whole story. And then the last piece there of attaching your CV. People do forget, and we cannot look at any application without a CV. So attach it, number one, but truly this is your time to shine. If you want to do a marketing spiel, if you want to list every publication or article or impact that you've made, throw it all into your CV, because it really helps us reinforce, or it helps reinforce the attributes and the expertise and the impact that you're making. It's very strict as evaluators that we're not doing our own research outside the application. The application is the only thing we're meant to be looking at. So make sure that everything that you want to say is in a concise part of the report, but also at the same time, use that. My suggestion would be to use that CV as your marketing tool, if you like. And then lastly, I think it helps as well. You've all seen the questions and the applications, but what are the full criteria that as evaluators we're looking at? And this slide is also presented earlier in the packs that you have. But be aware that those first two criteria carry the greatest weight in the scoring. So really make sure that you nail it nail your message in those two pieces. In criteria 3, although there's only a 20% allocation there, really use your CV to reinforce what your qualifications are, and that again can keep that score up, rather than trying to fill that criteria with too much in one go. And then we just talked about the economics with a budget. Be clean, be clear, be direct, and be as simple as you can. As Sylvana was saying, there are a lot of people applying. You're all experts. So it's very hard to make very clear decisions, but if you can help us really tick those boxes that we want to be independent and qualified to tick that criteria, make it easy for us. So really those are the pieces that I wanted to call out. And then really in summary, reminding you that the application needs to be in next week. And the funding is there. It's very rare to find funding that's so accessible for a certain select range of experts. And the biggest impact really is to start raising the impact of the EU and our expertise in standards and get them out there. So good luck, everybody. I hope this helps.
Wonderful, Caroline. It was extremely useful. I think what we're going to do is actually extract that part and send it to all the applicants so they can go back to that. But it was extremely informative and useful. So thank you very much. It's important to get that from the other perspective. I think the key word you said there was impact. I won't get past if there are any questions. I think it was quite self-explanatory. You've got some good comments in the chat as well. Great session, excellent, Caroline, so bravo. And what we'll do is then now pass the floor to someone on the other side of the table, who's Galia Kondova, who is our fellow. So we get the insights from a successful applicant from StandICT, and she'll zoom in on trusted information on blockchain, the case for public and private partnerships. So thank you once again, Caroline, and thank you, Galia. Over to you. We can see your slides.
Yes. Hello on my
Okay.
side as well. I'm really lucky to be able to join the StandICT community as a fellow. And this was possible due to my work on 2 use cases related to Horizon 2020 projects on blockchain. Namely, I started with use case on Interconnect, which is a Horizon 2020 project, which develops a framework for energy trading. And within this framework, peer-to-peer energy blockchain trading was an essential part. And now I was lucky to also get funding to work on another use case, namely the one on another European project, the Pharma Ledger project, in which a blockchain solution is being applied for different use cases, pilot projects in the healthcare sector. And this is an amazing opportunity and possibility for all different experts to get funding and contribute to the standardization activities and promote also the different solutions that are being generated in Europe. And in my presentation, I would like to share with you some of the findings, some of the work I have been doing, and not as a promoter of blockchain, but as try to be a neutral observer and researcher that takes the blockchain technology under scrutiny and check what are the solutions that this infrastructure offers for solving the trusted information problem, I should say, which was addressed by Sebastian and Caroline. So Sebastian was talking about how easy it is nowadays to fake face, fake video, fake text. So I guess it's also quite easy to fake some of most important pieces of information that we as citizens possess, namely a birth certificate, a driving license, diploma, or a passport. At the same time, the digitalization of these documents issued by public authorities is inevitable if we would like to drive forward these innovative business models, which Caroline was addressing. If we want to have innovation, if we want to have cross-border models, business models, so the digitalization of certificates, especially trusted documentation, as the ones I've mentioned, is inevitable. And the paper process, we know it, is one which requires a request from the citizen from a public authority, then the documents is provided in a paper form, but this option is, I would now dare to say, no longer an option in the digital age which we are living. So the most relevant question here again is how to trust digital information once we have documents in a digital form. And I would like to focus on these documents like certificates, license, or documents issued by public authorities. Why do I focus on this? Because these pieces of information issued by a trusted source, a public authority, basically would represent an example of a trusted information which would also like to ensure that is not tampered in the digital world as well. So the blockchain comes here to provide some solutions, and one of the solutions that was addressed by Sebastian was the self-sovereign identity concept, which is a form of a digital identity that could be modeled and implemented on blockchains. Here, we talk about the issuance of the so-called verifiable claims by public authority in my case when I focus on these different public documents. The respective verifiable claim could be stored then by the user in the so-called digital wallets. And then when the user would like to use this document and present this happens through the so-called verifiable presentation to a third party, which is the verifier. Now, the big challenge in this process, of course, is how to verify that the presented information is authentic, that it has not been changed. And the blockchain provides such a solution, and we refer to exactly this process of verification of the integrity and authenticity of information on the blockchain as the e-notarization. So the e-notarization is a process through which our digital document could be recorded on the blockchain in the form of an imprint with an associated hash. This is possible through encryption. And this hash remains in the ledger, which is the blockchain. For further verification by the verifier, the third party that would like to make sure that the presented document or information is authentic. Why the blockchain? Because blockchain offers us some characteristics like decentralization, persistency, anonymity, and auditability. These characteristics have enabled this infrastructure, the blockchain, to come into focus when looking for solutions for trusted information sharing in the digital world. And because the blockchain now is in focus as a solution to these problems, there are different standardization initiatives going on. And as I've mentioned, I had a chance to contribute to the UNEC chain project on blockchain interoperability, for which I wrote a use case on the interconnect project I mentioned to you. And now I'm able to work on another European use case, namely Pharma Ledger for the ICOTC 307 blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. Why am I doing that? Why is it so important that different experts from different areas join forces in the standardization work? Because at the end, the blockchain provides an opportunity to build public-private partnerships, which are inevitable if we would like to ensure this safe and trusted framework. And here are just a couple of use cases that speak in favor of these public-private partnerships. We have seen that blockchain has been used for the traceability, the tracking of an origin of products, as well as funding, also the energy consumption in supply chains. And as the concrete use cases of the European blockchain services infrastructure shows, there are always different stakeholders being involved. And most of the time, we have a public authority, a public institution issuing a digital document that needs to be verified, and the other stakeholders being either private entities as individuals or institutions. And that's why the standardization activity is an activity that involves all the stakeholders as well, public, private, and academia. And I also on my side would like to encourage you to take into consideration this great opportunity and for us to join forces in these great initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gaia. That was a very interesting analysis of how you're putting your call exactly into practice, which is good. Before we leave, we've come up to the hour. Unfortunately, Sebastian had to come off. I'd like to personally thank each and every one of you again, Sebastian, Caroline, Galia, for the entertaining and stimulating discussions. A point to everyone again for the open calls, just 2 features. We do look at the impact, as Caroline mentioned before, as one of the most crucial features of these open calls, and we do monitor them and kick out some impactful reports. So the effort you've done doesn't just stay with your call application, it goes into a publication that we want to give an incredible amount of visibility to as an outcome. So that's good visibility for your personal endeavors. And I can't remember the second point I wanted to make. So, well, with that, I'd like to thank you all once again, and we will send out the recording URL when we have this. And I do see, so there's a question from Gerhard Galia, this to you. Your contribution has examples of natural persons, but also legal entities. Are you aware that the G20 has launched the global lay program? I don't know if we have time to answer that. Galia, do you want to say a few words? You're mute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've just answered the participant. I'm aware about this program, thanks. But due to time restraints, I haven't integrated it in the presentation, but that's a very good comment, thanks.
Thank you very Gerhard. Thank you also for our participants who were very active. And with that, our webinar is over. Thank you once again, and get those applications in. Thank you very much. Bye, have a wonderful afternoon. Stay all safe, take care. Bye-bye.